is government, and Sean O'Callaghan.
I guess the slowest person to hit the mute button goes last is how it works. So for the government group, we really focused on kind of public policy, and we realize there's a kind of a scale issue. Water issues can be very localized, but the framework that we have to operate in is really decided at the state level through the laws that are in place. And we recognized that different agencies have different roles. We were really talking specifically about water conservation, and an example that came up to kind of highlight two different roles is the cities of Belgrade and Bozeman. They serve as a water utility. The county might care about water conservation, but we don't serve as a water utility. So our role and how we can influence water conservation is a bit different.
Can I elaborate on that real quick, Sean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, because in the county, the developments are on wells and septic systems, and in the cities, they're all on the public water supply and sewage. Cool.
Or in the county, they're also potentially on a water and sewer district system that the county is not involved in running. So our authority and our role is just a little bit different than someone who is a utility provider. And I think because of that, we tended to focus largely at county jurisdictional areas and what we could do to help influence water conservation. And so some of our comments were actually pretty similar to the economic group, but we were looking at informing and educating the public on water conservation opportunities. And we really looked at developing maybe some model documents that could be useful for people, some educational materials. One thing we kept talking about, and this might be another opportunity for one of the beavers, is some water-wise landscaping standards. Or sort of a sentiment that talking to developers in the county or in the city, it's not that they're opposed to using water conservation type ideas, but they have their template for their covenants, and it costs money to pay an attorney or a landscape architect to go out there and rewrite their kind of boilerplate templates. And so taking that step and coming up with some of that language that they could plug in, using opportunities to, those kind of opportunities to promote things like, low flow toilets, low flow shower heads, faucets, permeable pavers, other things that are a little bit different that have an impact on water conservation. Water harvesting, water capture was also something we talked about, informing people on how they could do it. So rain barrels, swales, things like that. We also talked about subdivision design, things like cluster development, whether that's providing continued opportunities for agriculture and agrihood, or just design that kind of gets away from a traditional irrigated park and has more naturally landscaped areas for passive recreation. Of course, the issue of ponds came up, and how they are not the most efficient use of water, and things that we could do to encourage people to not install ponds as part of their subdivision design. We also talked about some incentives and things like the city, the water utility providers, users have an incentive right now to conserve water, and that their water usage is metered, and they pay for every gallon they use. If you're on an individual well and septic, you don't have that same sort of incentive to conserve water. But I think creating that positive culture and peer influence, does have that impact. So if we could figure out a way to participate in some sort of grant program that would encourage people to install a meter on their well, so they understood how much water they were using and see the impacts of different water conservation measures, that could be beneficial. Another concept we talked about has also been raised already, a couple of them. Gray water was talked about, and gray water systems, and then encouraging subdivisions that are on previously irrigated land to try to work with ditch and canal companies to continue use of that water to provide landscaping water. And that provides carrying water for the ditch. It dilutes the operations and maintenance costs and keeps some of those ditches viable in the long term. So we really focused on informing and educating residents rather than kind of regulating. Anyone from the group have anything to add?
I'll add. So with all of that, it's hard to force this upon anyone, right? Because there's water rights, and so our and public pressure, and there's all these unintended consequences. And so, as Sean mentioned, building a model covenant for new developers to look at and maybe model after, like carrying, there could be a model of permaculture or water capture that we have as a resources for new developers. And since it's not mandatory, we can't pursue it. But there's a lot of value added in kind of that positive peer culture, as Sean mentioned, as we kind of have our backs against the wall with COVID and environmental crisis everywhere. People are looking for examples and good modeling to follow. And that was kind of inspiring to me.
To that point, something I forgot was to develop the water-wise landscaping standards. We thought there could be a good opportunity to partner with MSU's Landscape Architecture College, and that could be a really great student project perhaps, but also right along the lines of what you were saying, and kind of the positive peer culture and peer pressure, recognizing people that are doing these kinds of things, was giving out some awards, some community awards to recognize businesses or residences that are using the kinds of designs we want to see and kind of elevate their prevalence in the community a little bit, the awareness.
Another thing that I actually didn't mention because we had so many things to talk about, but and this kind of ties in a little bit with the climate plan that the city recently adopted, and in chatting with Natalie Meyer, who kind of runs our sustainability program, we thought, there could be an opportunity to maybe develop some sort of like Gallatin green homes program or development program, or whatever you want to call it, where we could specify potentially, different things for energy efficiency and water efficiency, and then certify, either that home or that developer, or whatever it may be, in the thought that there wouldn't be a big cost associated with that. I don't know what that would look like, and it would take a lot to probably flesh out, but that's another idea, a low cost idea as well.
Jessica, this is Sue Duncan. Big Sky did discuss doing that, and I think they've implemented part of that. So you might ask Gallatin River Task Force about that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, now that we have all these great ideas, a lot of times, sometimes, not a lot of times, sometimes after great ideas happen, people either move forward and act on them, or it just kind of dies. And so I thought we could close out the day by reflecting on what we've learned today and maybe some insights, and also maybe spend about 30 seconds and make a water pledge to your commitment beyond today in pursuing action. I'll go first. As a community member of Bozeman, my pledge is to use my shower coach more, and to invest as much as I can into how my property is capturing water and growing food. And I want to pledge to the ecosystem and wildlife around it that I'll be a good steward and make my property a home for everyone. And to connect with any of you anytime.
I'll go next then. I'll make more of a pledge from the perspective of a county commissioner. So almost everything that we talked about in our group are not really necessarily new ideas. They're things that have been tried before and maybe have failed, or failed in a different generation for different reasons than we have now. And as is such with a lot of the things that we investigate to find solutions for, hearing that it failed before is not really an excuse anymore, because attitudes have changed, perspectives have changed, the code orange has elevated, in a lot of this stuff. So I pledge to investigate and try to renew solutions that are certainly not new solutions, but that just we haven't been able to find the energy to implement, or the consensus to implement in the past. We have a lot of sticks and carrots that are at our disposal, and have not had the appetite in the past to maybe wield those things. I pledge to figure out what they are, why we don't use them, how we can, and what their utility is.
I'm Bryant. I am pretty far from being someone who could take big action, but as a consumer or as a resident of Bozeman, I pledge to be more conscientious about my water use. And as an event producer, I would be happy to be a volunteer for any of the community groups who may need volunteers in the future for any on-site projects or events that they may have when we get out of this COVID era.
I can go next. So as someone who works in urban water conservation all the time, I pledge to continue to push the envelope on code revisions, and in doing so, considering all the users and trying to find a way to balance all the interests and be cost effective for, consumers, for developers, for everybody. And I pledge to involve more stakeholders in our planning and in, when we have drafts of plans up for adoption, and including, agricultural groups in that, so that there's more transparency and that there's just more awareness of what the city's doing, knowing that we're one of many users and that we do, want to approach our work in a way that considers the entire valley and all of the people and plants and all those things that are here. I hear myself and I'm like, wow, that's really arguably impossible, but I pledge to at least do my best to do that.
This is Peter Brown. I pledge to continue asking questions, staying engaged, voting in all elections, and paying my taxes.
The question, Peter, will be, will you only vote once in that election or twice?
However many times they let me vote.
Brooks Terrell, as a developer, I pledge to put into action these efficient water systems that we can all use, and I pledge to put them into action immediately. And then another thing, I pledge to listen to all of you. I mean, seems like I've been on the opposite side of the spectrum of what all of y'all are doing, saying it's hard to communicate with developers, but I'm listening. I mean, I've learned so much today, and I think if you guys reach out to me with something that can help my development and help water efficient systems, I will listen, and hopefully we can come to something that I can implement. So thank you all.
It's a good segue into what I was thinking for my pledge, and it comes from what you just said and from some of the back and forth I was having with Tate earlier. And he talked about, trying to do a development, and there's so much information out there, and had a hard time finding it though. And so I think my pledge is kind of what I talked about for our group, and it's doing what I can in my professional role to help make that information more readily available to the public, so that it's easier for them to implement, and easier for them to just get up to speed on, as well as being a conscientious consumer and voting in elections and paying my taxes. And maybe I'll shower less often. I don't know.
Oh, no. So this is Krista Lee Evans, and I have a couple of different pledges. From a personal level, one of my most favorite places in the world is the Baja. And I use water there much differently than I do here. So my pledge is to use water here as if I were in the Baja, which is big. And from a professional perspective, my pledge is to not have preconceived notions about positions, and to continue to interact and work with all people involved with water, and so that we can coexist on the landscape, and we can have a vibrant agricultural community in the Gallatin and still allow the Gallatin to grow, but retain its intrinsic beauty that brought everybody here to begin with.
So since I work for the city of Belgrade, I'll talk from that perspective. The city of Belgrade is a little bit unique from a lot of cities in that we're 100% dependent on groundwater, and we do not discharge our wastewater into any active flowing stream. So we pump it out of the ground, and then a lot of it goes right back into the ground just a little north of the city, where our sewer treatment plant is. So we're keenly interested. And one other cool thing about Belgrade is right now we don't treat our water at all. It comes out of the well and goes right in the pipe. So we have some of the best water of a city of our size anywhere in the world, I would venture to guess. And so I guess my pledge is we want to keep it that way. We're very acutely aware of the, we got a good size aquifer underneath of us, we believe. But if it gets contaminated, we're really screwed. So I'm really focused on, we're going to do whatever we can do to keep it clean, and that's managing our stormwater better, and the implementation, putting in a $40 million sewage treatment plant, which we're just starting the process of doing.
All right, I can go. This is Christine from the Water Quality District. I pledge to promote the educational and outreach materials that we already have, and I'm really pushing this next year to get those in the right hands, work with the planning department, get those out to developers. We actually have a lot of materials that are similar to what we've talked about in the government lab today. So getting those out there to the public better, and then also really pushing on our ed and outreach during these COVID times to get more online resources for different facets of the public. And from a personal level, maybe a little bit shorter showers and a little bit less water use doing dishes. We don't have a dishwasher, so a lot of time doing dishes by hand, but probably could cut back a little bit on the use there.
I'll go next. I've got this nice little function of a conservation district that was next to my desk when I first started, and I think it works well as a good pledge. So, pledging to uphold the function of a conservation district, which is to take available technical, financial, and educational resources, whatever their source, and focus or coordinate them so that they meet the needs of the local land user for conservation of soil, water, and related resources. So, of course, here we're focusing on the water, but making sure that we're really focusing on the outreach and making sure that people have the access to the things they need in order to protect their land and conserve the water in their land.
I'll go next. This is Jim Gingery with Organic Forces Real Estate. My pledge is to incorporate many of the things that I learned today into any development we do. I think that's an important thing. And also to share what I've learned with the Gallatin Association of Realtors Board of Directors at our next meeting, and see what we might be able to do on that front to help spread the word of really what needs to be done when it comes to water in the Gallatin Valley.
I pledge to, I think, underline with any of my consultations with clients, just the importance of water in the Gallatin Valley, and to bring resources to every consultation, so that homeowners can go away and institute some of those practices in their homes and in their landscapes. I also pledge to do more outreach to my existing newsletter list, and other people that follow me around some of the initiatives that the Water Conservation District and the Watershed Council, more of the public outreach events and stuff that they have available, to get that out to my networks more consistently.
I'll go. I'm Karen Boyd. My pledge is twofold. One is to keep doing the work we're doing on floodplain resilience, floodplain reconnection throughout the Upper Missouri, which has been pretty effective. But secondly, today has made me realize that there's a lot of Bozeman that I avoid. I avoid North 19th. I avoid out near the new high school because it just makes me sad. And so what I pledge to do is to go out there and check it out and try and look at it in terms of opportunity rather than just sort of this loss of something. Try and find something positive in those areas and stop avoiding it.
I can go next. This is Holly. I pledge to continue to collaborate with as many diverse stakeholders as possible and make new connections with new stakeholders that we've not had a chance to reach out to. I also pledge to try to continue to increase the capacity of the Watershed Council so that we can, as Carrie mentioned during our breakout session, not have a bunch of plans and studies on the shelf, but actually put these plans into action. And then on a personal level, just wanting to pledge to get my well tested. And then also, and maybe I urge many of you, because there's lots of pledges here and lots of work, but just remembering that when we get tired or when I get tired, to rest and not to quit.
This is Zach. I pledge to continue to be passionate about water issues as an individual and a professional. And in my new role as a county commissioner, I pledge to be curious, continue to be a learner, try and listen to people who know more than me about different things, and open-minded when the situation calls for that, and also try and be courageous when tough decisions need to be made. So look forward to working with and for all of you.
I'm Josie Caton, and as a facilitator, I pledge to continue to support collaborative conversations, particularly those conversations that bring together people that might not typically find themselves talking to each other, as well as even conversations of people that might historically be in opposition to one another. As a consumer, I pledge to vote with my dollar as best as I can. And just personally, I pledge to keep the issues around water in context and realize that in the other projects that I'm doing, be they in climate change or issues of social justice, that all of these subjects are actually really interdependent. And while I might outright like not think of myself as thinking about water every day, to continue to weave that into the other conversations that I'm a part of.
I can go. I'm Brent again with DNRC, and I think on an individual level, I pledge to try to be a conscientious citizen, a conscientious water user, but also to remember to enjoy this resource, whether I'm fishing or skiing or anything like that, and to remember that passion, why we do what we do. On a professional level, as a public servant, I promise to make good use of everybody's tax dollars to try and treat all of these diverse stakeholders with fairness and equity and understanding, and to working for a large state agency to try to do the very small bit that I can to move that agency to accept creative solutions to all of these diverse problems and competing interests that we've talked about today.
I'm Pat Loken. I'm a consumer. I guess I'm not much of a big player in this whole water game, but I'll try to do what I can to promote people talking about it. Whether it's live streams or recordings or however it happens, I'll do it again.
Let's see. I think Susan. You want to go, Susan?
Okay. A lot of you don't really understand what it takes to irrigate, and I like to do tours, so I would be willing to have any of you come out individually or several people and show you what it actually takes to irrigate in terms of what you need to know about water rights, how that translates into what sort of equipment you need, and all the way through to 100 tons of hay and calves in the spring, because we are in a place with 76 acres where we do the whole thing on site, the entire thing from conception to consumption, to feeding them off our place, to watering it to get the feed, and then taking the manure back out. So it's completely circular as much as possible. And there are very, very few places that you can see that all in one spot. And also to understand all of the things that go into on a day-to-day basis, how to apply water to land to get a crop or to keep it healthy or however you want to do it. So I'm perfectly willing and be delighted to have you come out and see how that actually works. We talk about it as being like, farming is like having like those jugglers that have the dishes on the sticks, and we have like 3 or 4 going this time of year, but by summertime there's about 12, and we have to, it's like the interlocking circles of the Olympic symbol. Also, where we're sitting here, we're also where one of the places that was first settled in the Gallatin Valley in 1864. So consequently, on the ground, you can see the interchange between water rights as history going to the present day, as well as the railroad and all how it's laid out on the ground has historical precedents from the mid 1860s. So this is the place where it's happening, where you can kind of begin to blend Gallatin Valley history and why the ditches are where they are and how this all works and how it works on the ground. And so give me a call or an email and we'll see what we can do.
Thanks, Susan. Walter, Carrie?
There. Am I unmuted? I am, I believe.
Yeah.
Super. I'll pledge that when Tate gets a hold of me in a few months and I'm sitting in my tractor to not answer the phone. No, I will. Tate. No, I'll pledge because honestly, I think this is great that we've brought all of our differences together and talked about moving forward and the need for it. So I've enjoyed getting to know Tate over the years and how you let us express and you actually encourage us to express that. And then the other pledge would be to try to get my ag folks on that side, right? So my community to step up to the plate and continue to be involved and engaged at what they want to see the valley look like, and that they're going to be able to address change as it moves forward.
Thanks, Walt. Thanks for putting up with my shenanigans.
It's not easy, buddy.